Hi guys. Hello.
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 What's up?
These meetings as well published on YouTube.
Please follow my channel, like and subscribe.
Hi Benji. Hi Benji.
Hey, folks. How are you all doing today?
Not too bad.
Very optimistic.
I mean, it could be worse. So. Hi Jeff.
Hello. How are
Someone's already
y'all?
thought to set us up
Very good.
Can
Very
y'all
good.
hear me clearly?
Yes.
Awesome. How's your New Year's?
Good.
Same
Just
here.
returned.
Quiet though. I never really go out on New Year's, so just hanging out with the kids.
In New York or where?
I'm near New York, yeah, but
Ah.
I mostly stay put.
Yeah, we traveled this time. We were in Sedona for Christmas, which was really
That
nice.
sounds nice. All right.
Yeah, Grand Canyon on 1st of January. So.
Oh, that must have been nice. How was the weather there?
Cold, but no rain and super clear. So very amazing time to visit actually the national parks.
Yeah. I was there like a year and a half ago. I love the Grand Canyon, but I'll tell you the real highlight of the trip for me, and the Grand Canyon took my breath away for sure. But if you ever get a chance to go back and go to Antelope Canyon, it is
Yeah, we were there.
by far. You did? Okay, yeah. It floored me. I think about that frequently. It's one of the beautiful places in the world.
Yeah, we started in LA and then drove through Mojave Desert up to Sedona and then Monument Valley and all these.
Sounds like a great trip.
Yeah, with the kids. Awesome. I think we are almost complete or complete. Check.
Indeed. There does seem to be 12 of us here. Sorry, I just took a moment to sort the notes document out. I'm going to assume that everyone's here and we'll find out when we go through the attendees list in a moment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Composite Schemas working group in over a year. Very excited to have you all gathered back again. This is going to be an excellent meeting, I hope. By being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, and the code of conduct, all of which are linked in the agenda if you need a refresher. First, let's go around and introduce the attendees. We'll do that in the order that they are in the agenda file. If you're not already in there, please send a pull request. We'll start with myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Benji.
I suspect I'm next.
Yeah.
Hi, all. I'm John Sturridge. I work at IBM. We're kind of looking at composite schemas as the next phase for our API at the Kubernetes service. So very interested to collaborate here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael. I think Uri, he's on the road, so he will tune in at some point, but
Oh,
let's move on.
sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Ole, from the guild. Sorry, I can't see the list. I'm Ole from the guild. Really excited to be here. Yeah. I'm Pascal. I also work for Chili Cream and on the backdraft.
Yeah, Camille from the guild, working on distributed schemas.
Martin from Apollo, working on Federation.
Jeff from Apollo, working on a few things here.
Martin from Apollo, working on clients and more specifically Android ones.
Hi, I'm Dan from the guild.
Yeah, I'm Marder from the guild. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lauren from the guild and I'm working on Hive and Schemas.
Right. That was everyone on the list. Fantastic. Good to have a full house. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to have a couple of volunteers, please, to take notes. There is already a notes document that is linked from the agenda. So if a couple of people could put a hand up, say that they'll be able to contribute there, that would be great. Don't all rush at once.
I'm happy to do so. I might need somebody to take over when I'm talking, but happy to do it.
I'll also try to help.
Thank you both. Fantastic. Okay, so first step is to review the agenda. We're going to have a quick look at the previous meeting's action items. Those, I suspect, haven't been updated. And then on to a discussion on setting up a working process for the spec work, which will be hosted by Michael and Martin. So quick look at the previous action items, which would normally be linked, but apparently are not. So we have on everyone, please review the schema composability rules. I'm going to say, given that over a year has passed already, people have had time. So I'm going to close that issue. That is mostly just an announcement that that thing needs looking at. Next up is investigate, test, or rules suite for composability rules, which I believe is Yakov, who is not with us today. So I'm going to skip over that one. We have Lauren splitting the glossary into 3 files and add to the RSCs folder. Did you make any progress on that, Lauren?
No, it stayed untouched for a year.
Okay, fair. And we have Predrag, who I don't think was with us today as well. That was adding a Kensho example to the vendors document. But they're not here, so I don't think we can close that. Okay, well, that's the previous action items. On to the main discussion. So I'll hand over to Michael and Martin.
Yeah, so let's review a bit the history. We all know we had a couple of work on distributed GraphQL schema specs, and we had a lot of discussions with Kamil from the guild and Martin and me to come up with a common understanding of the specification. And we also did some work on that, but we have decided for today, we are not showing what we have because we have to do a bit more so that it's that everybody's happy with it and we can start really working on that in the open. So today we would like to set up and get a common understanding on how we want to work on this in separate meetings from this one. So this one, it's a monthly meeting, but to make some progress on spec work, we want to kind of do a similar setup as we did with Defer and Stream, where we have weekly meetings. We can skip one of these meetings if there is no real topic or we need to do more work on that. We can be very flexible on that, but that we have in our calendar one day in the week where we can work together on this. So we did that for a couple of weeks now, and just to get our ideas sorted. And here we want a bit discuss how we set this meeting up. Who's interested to also join these meetings? They will be open, and we will also feed back what we do in these meetings in the monthly meeting that we have here in the overall working group. But we also wanted to discuss what we want to achieve in these meetings. Like at the moment, we focus mainly on the topic of composition in these meetings to get a general understanding how graphs merge. That is actually also the things that we discussed in the composite schema working group back 1 year ago. What means, what do two types that have the same name, for instance, mean when they are different services, what the approaches to type merging is, and things like that.
Yeah. I would say compared to the goals previously, I think they were a little bit broader. Like we were really talking about composition in a very general sense, and I think that was one of the reasons we ended up not making much progress. At least from our perspective, I think this time the efforts are really focused on an understanding of federated composition. So really trying to come to an understanding of how different subgraphs contribute to an overall graph that we can execute queries against, as opposed to solving problems around like merging local schemas, for instance. So I think the goals are a little bit narrower, maybe. At least that's my understanding, but it would be interesting to hear from people who were in this working group previously, whether they agree with that take on it or whether they have additional goals that they would like to see addressed.
Like let me also like what we discussed like also internally is at the moment two components or two aspects of this. The one thing is the composition, and one thing is the execution. Although at the moment we focus on the composition, and we will explore if execution is feasible, because like in the execution part, there's also a lot of vendor-specific things where you can differentiate as a vendor if you implement the spec. So for now, we exclude that really to focus on composition, and then later explore if the execution is feasible to specify in detail, like what we are doing at the moment for the composition part, just to get a broader idea around that.
Yeah, one thing to add. Sorry.
Go ahead.
In general, we want to like align on how things are merged, like types, what are the rules, do they make sense, what are the pros and cons, and things like that. And so the composition is really like a two-step process, and it could be also split into like multiple steps per subgraph, per supergraph, whatever you call it. And yeah, so we could take this work step by step and figure out like the most basics, or even like the broad aspects, like how do we split those in the specification itself? Like, do we want to have two phases of validation, things like that? And later on, maybe go a little bit deeper and actually tackle the merging of the types and so on. Not sure what the plan should be, but those are the things we need to like, discuss and so.
Yeah,
In
also
order to have a spec.
Also a bit about the expectations here. Like this is spec work. It is not that we will have tomorrow a specification, also not in 2 weeks or in 3 months. Like my expectation is to have something well done in a horizon of 12 months around. But I think it's also important to get the expectations here right. There's a lot of detail work to do. There will be a lot of discussions, also a lot of back and forth where we maybe have, for one aspect of the specification, 2 or 3 trial implementations to figure out if that works for everyone. Yeah, it's just a bit to get the expectations of this. I think there's a lot of drive in this time. Yeah, go ahead, Martin. I didn't want.
Oh no, I just wanted to say I think one of the questions we also need to discuss, and that we've already discussed a little bit amongst ourselves, is sort of what does and doesn't belong in this spec. So I think deciding what to leave out is just as important as deciding what to put in it. There's definitely things that different implementations will want to add to the base specification, but that doesn't necessarily belong in there. And you already mentioned sort of detailed execution semantics, like a query plan format or a query planning algorithm. But there are open questions around other parts of the specification. The supergraph format, the specifics of sort of how to specify merging rules and possible validation errors. I think one of the things we'll have to sort of decide is what the right level of description for all of these things is. The GraphQL specification itself is fairly abstract, but still precise. And I think that's probably a good model to keep in mind. But we'll have to see sort of how concrete and how detailed we want to get with these different parts.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I will add that, like, I agree that there's like over specifying is a really bad thing and actually hurts innovation. But also I think sharing here all the ideas that we can would be maybe a better first step, because and then we can ask ourselves, do we want to specify that or not? Like limiting things beforehand, we might actually be limiting things that are actually great to specify, or there's no really big variations between vendors or something like that. So I would still encourage people to bring on their how they execute or how they build their query plan, and we can always just say, we think this is, thanks for sharing, but we think this is something we don't want to specify for now.
Yeah, I agree. Like that's why I said in the beginning we focus on composition and then do explorations into execution, and that is like not like we don't have to commit now to do something or to do not do. I think we can explore that as we go along. To exclude these parts at this point would be wrong. But also, like for all of this, we can, in order to not bind different vendors under these rules, we can do the same trick that we do in the GraphQL specification. We could, for instance, define an execution and then have an annotation that as long as the observable result is the same, you can do whatever you want, right? But as I said, let's focus on like we have a lot of work already cut out with the composition. Martin, me, and Kamel already had a lot of meetings on these things, and there is lots to explore and specify, and then we move on to the next thing and explore that, and from there we can move on. I think that's a good, reasonable plan. I hope. Yeah, so time-wise, at the moment, we have these meetings Thursdays. Basically, we had one today at 11 p.m. European time.
AM.
AM. Sorry. Yeah, it would be AM. But I recognize that many of you are in different time zones. It's luckily that Martin, me, and Kamil are all in Europe. But we can definitely do that later in the evening. Central European time, yes. Thanks. And we can definitely do that later in the evening if somebody that wants to attend these meetings is in a different time zone. So this is one thing, finding one outcome that we should have out of today's meeting, finding the right time that everybody agrees on. If everybody's in Europe, I'm fine with 11. Anybody in the US that wants in on the technical discussion?
I think John has his thumb up. Yep.
Yeah, then what about this time slot? Martin, does it work for you?
Yeah, that usually works. Yeah, I can make that work.
Yeah. The meetings, basically, we time box them 1 hour, no longer. Sometimes we go a bit over, but not much. So basically, we time box 1 hour. We discuss a topic. We keep the agenda on this repository. We will use the RFC folder that we have on this repository to put any documentation or exploration, so that everything is documented, even when somebody is not on one of these calls, that the outcome is documented and you can always hop in.
And just to check, that will all go through the Foundation Zoom as well, which means that the videos will be uploaded to YouTube. Yeah,
yes.
Fantastic.
Everybody all right with that, or do we have other points on this?
What would the purpose of then? We would still be meeting, I suppose, on a regular basis here at this slot, the Composite Schemas Working Group as well.
Yes.
Is that more or less clear? So we would be. This is slated for monthly, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes.
So we'd be meeting up monthly, and then in the interim, these would be made for incremental progress on whatever technical details need to be worked out, and then. So what would be the purpose of, like, let's say, like, if somebody wants to get involved who's not yet involved and things like that, they would come to one of these meetings and get, kind of, I guess, an update from what this smaller focus group has been working on in these weekly meetings and so forth, and then get a chance to provide feedback or ask questions at that time. Is that what we mostly envision the process looking like?
Yes, we basically have the larger meetings similar to the GraphQL spec working group, where we have smaller focused groups that can work in quicker increments on larger parts of the spec. Could also be that we at some point split into 2 or 3 groups. Maybe some people want to already explore execution stuff or query plant formats or whatever. Then this could at any point split off. Same as the GraphQL specification. And then in the monthly meetings, we report back so that everybody who wants to maybe also just stay informed can get an update on things. Does it make sense?
Can I suggest that we simplify a little and just have the weekly meeting and just pick one of those to be the primary meeting, which is much like what we do for the main working group. And if so, are we suggesting that this one, i.e. the second Thursday, would be primary? I would say maybe make it the first Thursday, and then it will be the same day as the primary GraphQL working group as well.
Okay. I agree. If everybody else is okay with that.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion, but I'm fine with.
Cool. So my understanding of what we've just discussed is that there will be a meeting at, I'm going to do it in my time zone, 4 p.m. London or 4 p.m. UTC on every Thursday for an hour. And the first Thursday of the month will be seen as the primary meeting, which will also summarize the last month's worth of progress.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. That sounds good. And I think simplifies a lot of things around the process, and I hope we get all behind a shared understanding of a specification here. And yeah, let's work on that.
Okay, just for those of us who weren't party to the meetings that you've been having over the last couple of weeks, could you expand on the reasons or some of the reasons? So, for example, you mentioned that you want to focus on the federated schema and not worry about merging local schemas, which sounds to me like what you actually want to focus on is maybe the network side of things, because that could be one of the differences that would differentiate between a remote and a local schema. If that's not the case, could you clarify the distinction there, please?
So basically, before we discussed more abstract topics, like what is the process of merging types? So how do we merge, for instance, an extended type into a proper type without the context of a federated or distributed GraphQL architecture, right? This is much more an opinionated and a much more opinionated way of distributing GraphQL, which is a collaborative approach to create an overall graph from multiple microservices, if you will, or domain service, or whatever terminology you want to take there. Whereas before we had much more abstract discussions, and what the community actually wants is a common specification that is much more clear on how we build a distributed GraphQL setup, how to build a gateway, how to compose different subgraphs, so that open source projects or other companies can implement tools around this specification. So
the composition rules,
for
for instance, are also sort of specific to the federated use case. So they take sort of entry points into remote graphs into account when deciding whether a particular composed schema is valid, whether it sort of allows execution of all valid queries. So we don't have the luxury of sort of merging local schemas and just executing resolvers on them. We do have to take the defined entry points for each subgraph into account in this case. I think that's one of the primary differences.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, there is pretty much no need even for the network. Basically, what we want to achieve is like GraphQL schema object in like JS world, talking to another GraphQL schema object, and that's pretty much it. And then only the the top level stuff, let's call it gateway or like supergraph, doesn't really matter. But basically, the thing that merges it all and orchestrate the calls. This can or cannot, or like may or may not be the GraphQL related part pretty much, because it's not really using like resolvers and stuff. It could, but it doesn't have to. It's just that it needs to orchestrate the calls and return it in like GraphQL format, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so far what we also started on specifying around composition rules has nothing to do with networking or how we execute something. There's nothing about transport in it. It's more about how types are semantically equivalent, how they are merged, how they it's about shareability. There are a lot of different concepts about how we can merge types in a distributed architecture.
Thank you. That's much clearer.
Yes, there's, as I said, there's a bit, I think on the next meeting, we can start also more show a couple of examples, maybe go into a couple of composition rules, basically review a bit the work that we are doing. For now, there's not enough substance that we achieved so far that we are happy to share it at the moment. But I'm happy for everyone who wants to work on that to jump in on these weekly meetings, and then we can create a bit more spec text to be happy with it.
Should we also align during the next meeting on the scope of work? Like to actually like not even go into details of like composition and stuff like that. Maybe we should focus on the goal. So for example, if you want to have, I don't know, like precisely defined composition, yeah, let's do it. If you want to like have a definition of like two-phase validation of, you know, things, then let's also do it. Like things like that, I guess it makes sense because then we understand the goal of each, let's say, company, person, domain, whatever. So then we can align on it, because if we just go into like the actual implementation or the actual specification, then we might end up with a situation when, you know, kind of hit, you know, a conflict, I guess, or like, you know, things like that. So maybe like defining the scope of work, like focusing on that, like, you know, I think it makes sense, at least from my side.
I think that's a really good call out, Camille. And in fact, that would be a good aim for the weekly working groups to solve and then present at the next primary meeting for us to vote on as a group and see if we all agree to that. If you feel that makes sense. Speaking of goals, I know Jeff added the topic, which has been replaced, for doing definitions or a glossary, or I forget what the specific term was. I think that would still be a useful piece of work and is also critical for understanding what we mean when we say what the scope is, because we're going to probably be using some of those terms. So that would be also a great thing to expand on in parallel.
Yes, we have started with an appendix, and in this appendix we will explain all the terms. Like we started on defining what's a supergraph, or what is a subgraph, what this entity means. There's a bit more work to do on that. Also what are keys? These are all things that the spec will outline.
Will that go into detail too of like the different implementations that are out there that you know, like we're coming at this with, you know, now we have implementations out there that are that have this idea baked into them, right? Polar Federation being one, Infusion being another, and things like that. Like the meanings of those things and where those come in, would that be useful to have in there, or would that be something more for the understanding of the group? Or I guess I'm just trying to understand when people, you know, when users kind of see the specification effort and things, like what conclusions will they draw from it, I suppose?
Yeah. So the like when you look at Fusion or Apollo Federation, they're both collaborative ways to build a distributed GraphQL schema. So they're from the base idea very similar. There are some differences, and we reviewed them a bit and made a couple of decisions to drop some aspects of each of them that maybe vendor-specific things that can be added later. Like for instance, from when we look at Apollo Federation, there's a lot of policy stuff and authentication stuff, which is things that are very vendor-specific. and that don't make sense in the general specification. Fusion, for instance, has, apart from that, vendors, apart from the collaborative approach, which is very similar to Apollo Federation, also type reshaping. Think about things like mesh, and we also decided on this. This is not for the core spec, for instance, because like type reshaping could happen in a vendor-specific solution or even at the subgraph level. So we are making these explorations. What is each of these things doing? And my hope here, and it's like we had very fruitful discussions, is that we get a best of all the ideas out there and have a shared specification in the end. But we will also outline why things make sense or not sense in these things, I think, in the discussions.
Yeah, I think that shared spec will likely end up as sort of a subset of both Apollo Federation and Fusion or other implementations.
That sounds good to everyone. I mean, there will be more more substantial discussions, but I think it's like it was great working with Martin and Kamil so far. We had a lot of ideas. We shared a lot of, looked in all kinds of aspects, and I can't wait to have other people joining and also giving their input.
Michael, it might be helpful to skim the PR that's up there for the glossary. Quite a bit of collaboration there in terms of shared terms and what we probably can't use because they're overloaded, that kind of thing.
Yes.
I can create like a list of possible items that we can like align on. For example, if we like want to do the whole spec, I can split it into smaller pieces to make it like more atomic, and then we can discuss individual items if we want to like push it to the spec or not. Like for example, if we want to have shareability by default, or do we want to have cross-type resolution between subgraphs and things like that. Or like when it comes to validation, do we want to have validation per subgraph, or do we want to have also like, do we want to split the validation into like multiple phases and things like that? Because then I guess it might be easier, to have it up front.
Yeah, we did a lot of discussions on that.
Yeah,
but we should, we can formulate a bit the reasons around that. Martin did already do some work, for instance, on these kinds of things, and that we can add as separate RFC documents where we outline why we decide on certain things. Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful to have sort of an overall structure ready for the next meeting, sort of describing our shared understanding of the terminology, the different phases for composition, for instance, that we think are useful to differentiate, without necessarily going into detail on each of them, but sort of describing their purpose and why we think it's useful to formulate these as sort of separate phases. Like that might be the right level of abstraction for the next meeting, but we can talk about that over the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
And it's very important to write these things down, because as it is with spec work, usually you have 2 weeks, 3 weeks spec memory, and after that it just disappears into nirvana. So it's very good when we have like the RFCs, when we comment on the pull requests, because then we have line comments and stuff like this. This really adds traceability in why a decision was made, because over the next months, when this specification evolves, if we don't have traceability, we will do the same mistake multiple times. So it's good when we have it somehow documented.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That all sounds excellent. And in particular, I prefer the pattern that the GraphQL spec itself takes, which is a very lean core, and then relying on additional specifications. Now, whether those additional specifications end up as appendixes or as separate documents, like that can be decided later. But I would aim for a lean core. So even things like specifying the format of the plan that you want to display to the user, that seems optional to me. Like, it'd be great if everyone can align because you can share tooling, but also if someone wants to build a thing that doesn't execute in the same way but has the same result, then actually building that query plan might end up being somewhat expensive to do. So it should be optional. And we do that a lot in GraphQL. For example, the connections specification and the object identification specification, two very commonly implemented things that aren't required for you to be GraphQL.
Yes, I agree. And specific, like the query plan format could also be a cross-cutting concern, which like, I mean, you built also a specification for something that uses query planning in a normal GraphQL server. Could even be a more abstract thing. Doesn't have to be, but I'm just saying could be a totally separate thing that is even shared with other GraphQL components. That's very good.
Excellent. Is there anything that anyone else wanted to discuss at today's meeting? Well, sounds like we're all aligned, which is a good starting point. I will take as an action item, unless, Michael, you want to do it, creating the relevant documents for the agendas for the upcoming meetings, creating the Zoom, which I think, to be honest, we can just use this one. I don't think I need to do any work on that, and so on. And then everything should be set up for all future meetings.
Yeah, I ping you after the meeting so we can schedule the Zoom meetings. Yeah.
Well, one thing too is I think the Google Calendar should or could be updated as well. I don't think these meetings are on the general GraphQL working group calendar.
I now have
so that's
access
another-
to that one. So can I take that as a second action item? Whoever's taking the notes, update the calendar.
Sounds good.
This is the Google Calendar you're referring to, right?
Yeah, like the one where the primary working group meetings show up on and everything.
Cool. I'll take care of that. And in general as well, if anyone else notices any issues with any of the GraphQL events not showing up in the right place on the calendar, please just send me a Discord message and I'll get it sorted.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a wrap then. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you, some of you next week and others of you next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.